Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of the Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Terri da Silva, Vice President, Global Head of Portfolio Brand and Content Marketing at Marriott International. Terri, what a pleasure to see you, particularly with wonderful, wonderful Bonvoy advertising, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Wonderful. Well, look, let's start with something that I think might be personal for you. You often say that you joined Marriott International because you believe in the transformative power of travel. Interestingly, Marriott Bonvoy has just launched a new campaign that taps into the essential emotional aspects of travel. Would you tell us about the inspiration for the Travel Shapes Us campaign? And hey, and what does it mean to you personally?
Yeah, so it's actually, so we call it the platform, Travel Shapes Us, that we plan on having a number of different campaigns sitting underneath. But we just launched it a few weeks ago in early April. For us, the inspiration behind this was if you look at our overall just belief as a brand and our vision as a brand, we believe in the transformative power of travel. We have always said that from the beginning of when we've launched this brand. And, when we think about the transformative power of travel, it has a number of different layers. So we think that it can impact, and I always talk about it, the multiplying effect. It can impact you. And by it impacting you, it can help impact your community or those around you. But then it can also make an impact in the world. And it was interesting because I sent a number of people, I think over Mother's Day, there was an article, I think it was in Condé Nast, where this woman was talking about how travel shaped her life, but it was really through the lens of her mother. So her mother was always traveling and then would bring back those stories of her experiences and how that shaped her and how that really got her interested in travel. So I do think that it has a real huge impact, I think, in a number of different ways across people and communities. And so for us, it was really about how do we bring this to life? How do we bring it to life in a way that's going to emotionally land with our audiences? We know that, travel is about the stay. It's about where you're staying. And obviously, every brand needs to deliver against that experience that they promise. But it's also about what you take away from that experience. And so we always talk about what is a lasting experience. So you may offer a number of different amenities, but what does it actually do for your guest? And so that's really what we wanted to pull out in this body of work and really start standing for that. And then what was your next question?
Oh, it was just we don't have to follow it all, but I just thought, what did it really mean something to you personally? Because there seemed to be such an amazing connection between
Yeah,
how you describe yourself and how the campaign works.
absolutely. I think for me, and as you get older in your career, you really start making choices to focus on areas I think that really have some sort of personal connection to you or that mean something to you. And that was really important for me when I chose to come to Marriott. It was really because I love travel, but I also see how travel has shaped my own experience and the experience of my family. And so for us, it was just, do I having that aligned kind of understanding of the power of travel was really important for me.
No, yeah, and I'm very impressed with what you said about just almost the multiplier effect.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
and as someone who spent a lot of my life traveling as well, you do forget about the multiplier effect. That's very interesting. The campaign though itself, I
Yeah.
think also departs from traditional advertising or
Mhm.
traditional hotel advertising, for example. Because typically, you find hotels showcasing, as you say, the amenities, whether it's the
Mhm.
pools or the restaurants or whatever else, the luxury rooms. But yours really is about a personal and an emotional connection. So
Mhm.
because of that, I'm really curious about how you gauge the success. Is it
Yeah.
about more members with the more Bonvoy members or more booked nights, or is it something else?
Yeah. So I think, as we think about this work, and I would keep in mind that the way that we look at it, it is a body of work. So not just a 30-second film that you might be familiar with, but even when you think about it at a platform level of Travel Shape Says, we expect that the platform works full funnel. So we're going to have assets that drive consideration or upper funnel metrics. We're going to have assets that drive bookings. We're going to have assets that fall underneath this that actually drives membership and member engagement. And so our expectation is that it will hit against all of those objectives that we have. When we think about this body of work, I thought it was interesting when you said, that we don't show those things. That we actually do show those things, but they're shown in a way that delivers against the experience. So we do show a restaurant. It's our Man Ho award-winning restaurant at the JW in Hong Kong. So that's a Michelin-rated restaurant that we have.
I've been there. I have been there.
You have?
Of
It's
course.
lovely and it's
Yeah.
amazing. And we've
Yeah.
actually also created a 15 that goes into much more detail about that specific restaurant. But we also show like one of our rooms. We have a luxury room at the JW in Masai Mara, right? So we show them, but we show it in context of what that experience then provides to the guest and to the individual. And that's really what we want to carry through. And if there's an interesting line at the end where we talk about it's just, all of these experiences have the opportunity to shape you. And it's really your collective experience through travel and how that can shape you. And we're not saying that everything needs to be life-changing. It could be a number of different small turns, but it's all of those things put together, I think can really help shape who you are, shape your worldview, shape how you look at others, et cetera.
Yeah, and sometimes it's that nuance that drives a
Mhm.
bigger impact
Yes.
than
Yeah.
simply showing it. And that's, I think, one of the things that brings such a sophistication
Hmm.
to this campaign.
Hmm.
I have a more practical question.
Yeah.
Do you tailor these initiatives to local markets, or do you plan to? I mean, particularly with this campaign. Um,
Hmm.
or are you looking for something that would be globally consistent for all travelers? I
Yeah.
mean, that must
Yeah.
be always the dilemma you face.
Hmm. I think for us, so when I think about the platform and the way that we're actually building out the work, we have a platform and think about the platform being, what is that strategic thread and what are the executional mandatories? So things that people see and hear that will hold all the work together as we build out this world. So we work with an agency, we work with Wyden Kennedy, New York, and they call it signifiers. Where I used to work, we would call it something different. But what are all of those pieces so that when you run into this work, no matter where you are, no matter what job it's doing, so whether it's driving consideration or it's driving enrollments, you know that you've entered into our world. And so we want everything to hang together through that lens. I think, though, when you think about the individual campaigns that sit underneath that, and so this first campaign also has the name of Travel Shapes Us. Do we expect this campaign to travel around the world? We are actually working with all of our continent leads to talk about how they plan on moving this out across their different regions. And so we expect our overall platform to travel around the world. When it comes to specific bodies of work, that's really going to depend on what is it that they need to do within the market. And so we also are making sure as we start building out additional IMCs, if you will, what are the demand spaces that we're going after? And then based on that, what is the work that we need to do to deliver against those spaces? And so that might require different executions or different work, but, more to come there.
Yeah, and it could simply evolve based on some of the feedback. Um,
100%.
well, here's a question for you. First of all, it has to begin with I don't know how you do it. Your role is the global head of portfolio for brand and content marketing.
Mhm.
You've got more than 30 leading brands, 9,000 properties in 141 countries and territories
Yeah.
across a spectrum of luxury, premium, select, longer stays. I mean, how
Mhm.
do you manage it? I mean, I realize Bonvoy is part of the overarching platform, as you've said a
Mhm.
couple of times, but how do you manage it? How do you stay relevant for all of that?
Well, and I think that there's me and I have my team. And just so that like we manage, so from a brand standpoint, we manage our premium and select brand tiers. Luxury is handled by a completely different group. But I have an amazing team. I have amazing leaders on my team. They've got amazing teams surrounding them that support them. We also have really strong relationships with all of our continent leads, and a lot of that work happens within the continent or comes to life within continents. And so we work very closely with all of our leads within all of those places, and they've got continent marketers, but then you also have field marketers within those organizations. So there is a whole army of people behind the Marriott Bonvoy brand. And I always talk about that it takes a village, and it truly does, to get anything moved through this system here. And we also have just great leaders. I've got a very supportive leadership team that really ensures that we have what we need, and that we can scale the work. There's a lot of work that comes from the center, but I'm a huge believer that great work can come anywhere. We used to say that where I used to work, and I fundamentally believe that. So we're not even saying that everything needs to be developed here in the center. We want to make sure that the core pieces are, and the core, I think, strategic threads are, but then we can get great collective ideas. I was actually just talking with someone on my team earlier today that there's this technology platform that we might actually lean on that is being developed in another region, but because they've gotten there before everyone else has. So I think that it's a lot of, how do we work together as an organization around the world, but then also across multiple teams and multiple disciplines.
No, I think you're right. And I think certainly we've always proven that great ideas can come from anywhere in all
Mhm,
sorts of areas. And that's
mhm,
so exciting.
yeah,
But it seems to me that
mhm,
it could be that maybe travel is going in a slightly different direction with live tourism. And
mhm,
Marriott and Bonvoy has certainly done more with experiences or
yeah,
experiential partnerships.
yeah,
You've done Taylor Swift promotion,
mhm,
and I think
mhm,
you might have enrolled 500,000 new members or some. I mean, it's been extraordinary metrics on that. You've mentioned the Beyonce Cowboy
mhm,
Carter tour, and I think
mhm.
even Shaun White, the former
Yeah,
Flying Tomato, for his sports league. So
yes.
tell us about the significance of that. And is that something that we're only going to see more of?
I think you will, and you've probably seen even with our competitors, I think, coming out and talking more about experiences. I think two things. I think when you look at all of the data and you look at the purposes or reasons why people are traveling, I think historically, especially when you think about, leisure travel kind of picking up even more so, it is for experiences. It is for all of those things that they have huge passions for. And I think, people really want to make sure that, especially I think coming off of COVID, want to make sure that, they experience the life that they want to have. And that's obviously through experiencing life through their passions. And so we're very much focused on how can we help people understand, and how can we deliver against some of those passion points that people might have, but understand that we also have, within our overall portfolio, things that we can deliver against those passions. And so we also, though, did some research at the very beginning of all of this. We did some research, I think it was the end of 23, where we looked around the world across 6 different markets, and we wanted to understand, when it comes to driving consideration, we looked across everything that we had to offer in terms of lodging, different lodging options, but also experiences and services. What are the things that we needed to put in front of people to really drive consideration? And when you look at it all at the end of the day, and we saw a lot of uniformity around the world, experiences was one of those things. Like, what are the distinct things that we can provide to them, which has led a lot of our, work around the actions that we're doing or the partnerships that we're doing. But it's also just led around how do we start elevating experiences in our communication and using experiences as a way to help build the overall story of what we have to offer. Because at the end of the day, it's the stay, but it's also the experiences that help shape you. And so we just want to make sure that, everyone has an understanding of what we have to offer as part of our portfolio.
And it also feels that experiences and stories go very much hand in hand,
100%. They do. They
which
do.
is quite interesting. Which
Yeah.
leads me to maybe another question, kind
Mhm.
of about culture. I mean, many marketers talk about the speed of culture and responding to cultural moments.
Yeah.
Certainly, you did that with Taylor Swift, with Cowboy Carter, and so on. So, I- can brands create a movement, because of these cultural moments, or is this just wishful thinking? Or are these now the new fundamentals of branding? I mean, this is a heady question, but I think you are right at that sweet spot to be able to answer it.
Mhm. I think brands have to play in culture. I think, getting part or being part of the cultural conversation, I think is important for any brand, especially for brands that really want to, connect with younger audiences. I think being part of culture is key. And I think, there's a lot of different ways that brands can get into culture, whether that's through partnerships, whether that's through merchandising partnerships that they might have, whether it's through, there's a number of different ways that you can get in there. For us, there are different ways that we are doing it. I think one way, though, that we were very pointed in doing was as we were going through our agency search. I think there are some agencies that naturally get into the cultural conversation with their brands versus others. And as we were looking for the right partner, one of the things that influenced our decision was we chose an agency that just naturally and fluently, I think, connects with younger audiences and connects through culture. And that was Wieden and Kennedy, New York. If you look at some of the work that they have done across, brands that I would say are somewhat legacy brands, and even though we are still a new brand, Marriott Bonvoy. We just started in 2019. The reality is with Marriott in our name, we are somewhat of a hybrid of a legacy brand slash, a brand that is relatively new. And what I really liked as I looked at some of the work that Wieden New York has done is they've taken these very traditional brands, so like a McDonald's or like a Ford or some of the others, and really made them relevant through conversation to a younger generation. And so that was really important for us. So there's different ways that we're going about doing it. One is also just engaging in passion points and doing it in a way that working with some of our key partners so that we can do that in a way that's going to land with our audiences.
I'm just curious as just an aside, if you don't mind answering it. I know the importance of connecting with younger people, but I would also think for
Yeah.
travel,
Mhm.
there's probably an older segment, and maybe I'm just more aware of this now, given my own age, but an older segment that might be a more moneyed segment and might be able to even spend more time or do more. I wonder if some of the same things appeal to them or if the passions are different or that, because you would think that that could be a major source of revenue as
Yeah, yeah. Well, and when you think about Marriott Bonvoy, I mean, as you kind of alluded to earlier, our portfolio is diverse, and it spans across, I think, the need states of life stages. I think of like life experiences, lifestyles. And so we have a wide portfolio within our offering that does appeal to different types of travelers, different types of trips, whether you're on a business trip or a leisure trip, et cetera. So we fundamentally throughout our entire portfolio, there is bits of work that, really, I think speaks to and tailors to different audiences. And I think that, the what in terms of when you talked about passions before, I think the what can be the same across generations. I think how it comes to life just might be different, and I think speaking of passions, my husband just took my nephew as an example earlier this year to Tokyo because he's really interested in the MLB as my husband is. And they had an exhibition game of like the Dodgers against, I'm not really sure who they were playing against,
the
but
Yomiuri Giants. Yeah.
yeah. So he went out there and took my nephew because they're so passionate about baseball and there was an exhibition game. So I think it's just one of those things that, I think generations of people can be interested in the same thing. I just think how you might bring that to life, where you might bring that to life might vary based on, who you're going after and who you want the message to reach.
No, that's a very good point, and it's also quite wonderful, even in advertising, to
Yes.
sometimes see the multi-generational elements of
Mhm.
it. It
Mhm.
does make you smile. It does make you smile, regardless of which generation you identify with at that moment in time. Well, I'll just here's a couple of
Yeah.
just quick question. Maybe this is a little philosophical, but nonetheless, do you think marketing is at an inflection point? I mean, it seems like there's some really big challenges facing brands that are quite different than a decade ago. And I'm just wondering, everything reinvents itself, everything evolves, but it feels like there's something different about marketing.
Yeah, I would say, as I think about marketing and the changes that are happening today, it's more about the how. So how the work gets done, how you communicate, the tools and vehicles in which you do so. So, I was actually even just talking with my team about some of the things that we also need to do. So when you think about scaling the work globally, what are those technology platforms that you need to lean into so that you can scale more efficiently? So I think those things are constantly evolving and probably evolving significantly faster than even like 5, 10 years ago. But I think the fundamentals are always still the same. So, you still will, obviously want to obsess about your audience and who you're trying to connect with, really understand them, understand their pain points, understand what's really going to motivate them. You need to understand message hierarchy and what is the best way and how do you actually put messaging in front of them, etc. You need to understand your competitive advantage. I think all of the fundamentals are still there, but it's just how you go about doing the work is incredibly different, and I think is probably going to change significantly and faster over the next few years than what we've seen before. And so I think as any marketer, it's really important to make sure that you understand all of the step changes that are happening that's going to impact how you do your work. Um,
And
mhm.
not easy, not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah,
It's like having another job. But speaking of jobs, your marketing career has been wonderfully varied. I mean, from banking to CPG to,
yeah.
with more sustainable and purpose-driven roles, now
Mhm.
travel. I'm assuming there's fundamentals that work
Yeah,
across all of them. But
yeah.
or do you meld all that learning and just bring it along with you to all those new categories? Because you've got quite a diversity of experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge believer in transferable skills, and so I fundamentally believe that you can transfer across like different categories, if you will. You can join obviously different types of organizations and bring to bear what you've learned from the past. I've always, even since in high school, been interested in human behavior, and that's really what got me into marketing. I was always interested in, why did people buy a specific pencil or, this chocolate bar versus the other chocolate bar? And so to me, it's always been that quest to find, why do people behave the way that they do? How do then organizations put in front of them what they think is going to be the solution to what they're looking for? So those are sort of the core tenets of what's always interested me. And as I've grown in my career, it's not necessarily been a change in terms of the type of work, but it's just more a change in terms of leadership and what you have responsibility for. But I always talk about, and I share with my team, I was actually doing the direct to consumer marketing before it was actually cool. So one of my first jobs when I came out of graduate school was I was working at Kraft Foods and I was working in Javalia. And at the time, Javalia was a direct to consumer.
Ah, that's right.
It was, and now it's obviously in retail. But I remember, and that was probably the less sexy part of marketing because it wasn't as cool as some retail marketing. I think most of the marketing was done through retail, or distribution was done through retail. But I just thought it was so fascinating because you had such a good read in terms of understanding intimate one-to-one behavior with your audiences, and that was really fascinating to me. And it's interesting to see how that's come back. When you think about all of the younger brands that are coming out today, a lot of them have been developed based off of that model, and then try to get into retail. So it's interesting that they,
Yes, and then try to do TV commercials to
yeah,
scale, which is
yeah,
unbelievable because you used to think that
mhm,
DTC brands could never, ever
yeah,
afford something like that.
yeah,
But also now there's a lot more tools available, a lot
yes,
more
yeah,
online tools and digital
hmm,
tools available to make
yeah,
that a little bit easier.
hmm.
Well, finally, now in closing, although I think I would like to speak to you for like at least half a day. So are you the sum of every trip you take? And is travel still the best way to find more of yourself?
I think yes to both. I think like when I think about what has shaped me the most, and it's interesting because one of the reasons why I married my husband was because he also grew up in a family that loved travel. And I remember I had done a lot of travel early on in my career, and he grew up in a family where they wanted to go to every country in the world. And so he traveled, and that was really one of the things that brought us together was this love of travel. So I would say yes, like travel has like shaped who I am and has shaped some important decisions in my life. And then I think travel is just I think travel is one of the things that really just shows you what you have within yourself. I think you have to be in, when you, let me actually phrase that differently. I think travel just, I think it opens your eyes to things that you haven't seen before. I think because of that experience, I think it does shape you. I think it is one of those things where you can read about something and you can get, knowledge about something, but until you actually experience it, it doesn't land the same. It's kind of, I've had conversations a long time ago. I remember talking with my niece and nephew, and we were talking about something, and they said, but Aunt Terry, here's what I've read in school. And I would say, yes. So you have a lot of that book knowledge, but until you actually experience it, it's just going to be different, and it's not going to be as impactful, and you're not going to have as full of an understanding without having actually experienced it yourself.
No, you make a good point, and it's sometimes the physical reality that also
Mhm,
inform our mind.
mhm.
Having to figure out how to pay for the metro ticket,
Yeah,
making
yeah,
sure that you do switch here, and if you're in the UK, minding the gap, and if
yeah.
you're but it's even more than that. There is
Mhm,
something about physically being in a place
mhm.
and just just learning about it through being there.
Yes, yeah.
And not only rushing to
Mhm.
maybe a five-star restaurant experience, which could be
Yeah.
wonderful if you can do it, but
Mhm.
it can be as simple as noticing that the sidewalks are marble, or you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It is extraordinary. Well, you
yeah.
have done an amazing job to bring this campaign to life, and to also just make the Bonvoy brand so much more accessible and
Mhm,
aspirational.
mhm.
And I'd love to talk to you more about more of the iterations and more of the results that you see.
Yes, yeah.
And that would be really terrific. But in the meantime, congratulations for getting this off the ground. It's just such a fun campaign, and it is emotional.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Thanks. Bye.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.